At 6, 2 teens face a slew of charges for a Friday night shooting right near Howard University during homecoming weekend. 5 people were injured, including a 13-year-old boy. We're told all the victims are expected to recover. D.C. police have arrested 19-year-old Hassim Parker and 19-year-old Julie Sabur on Friday. Howard says nobody from the university was involved in that shooting.
And what you just saw was a clip from one of the most recent HBCU shootings that we've had. And this is my first MiniPod here on Native Land.
Congratulations, man.
And
welcome.
I'm glad you took my call this week.
Hey, listen, you're already doing better than me. You actually got your mini. You came in straight.
No, I just had this
pod.
idea because you were an SGA president. I was an SGA president, but you have this experience of being a mayor. I was in the state legislature. So what I wanted to talk about is just recently at Alcorn State, most recently at Howard University, at Jackson State, at South Carolina State, right near my home. We've had this rash of violence surrounding, our culminating events, for lack of a better term, our homecomings. You have Howard's homecoming, you have GHO, you have Spellhouse, you have whatever you guys have.
FAMU, don't try it, but
whatever you all have.
Don't try it. The
Florida.
nation's strong.
Anyway, but I wanted to talk about how we make sure that, because I want my kids one day to go to an HBC, and how do we make sure that those institutions are safe? How do we control the media narrative around these shootings? And the other thing is one of the things that can be most devastating to historically Black colleges is if this perception becomes a reality in people's minds, and then it becomes a dent in their enrollment.
Yeah, no, that's for real. And I actually, Bakari, believe that latter piece you just picked up on, impacting the enrollment of these institutions. For some people, that is the plan, right? To make the image such that people associate with an HBCU violence, not academic achievement and chain breaking and upward mobility. I got to say, I'm really of two minds about these events, particularly the ones that we hear broadcast out local, state, nationwide when it has to do with a historically Black college and university. The reason I'm of two minds, Bakari, is because I was an SGA president. I remember as an SGA president having to negotiate with the local law enforcement around what would law enforcement presence look like at the mall? What is the exit plan after the game? And are all streets going to be closed down? Or will we have some conveniences like Florida State University does when it has its games 4 or 5 times larger in population than ours? So I remember as a student activist trying to negotiate that space. Then I became mayor and people were discussing and negotiating that space with me. And from my standpoint, at that point, my only goal is safety, security, that people move in this space without feeling threatened to their life, to their body, to themselves, to their family, to their loved ones. And I got to tell you, my biggest frustration, particularly as mayor, was anytime there was a violent event that occurred during FAMU's homecoming in the city, near the campus or away from it, was always broadcast as during FAMU's homecoming, there was a stabbing. During FAMU's homecoming, there was. Now, if a similar event happened, and I had the ability to have a PWI and an HBCU, both state schools in the same city, if an incident happened that was violent during a Florida State game or Florida State homecoming, it was never introduced into the news as there was a violent event at Florida State University's football game this weekend. So there's deliberate intention, in my opinion, and then there's what's real, and I think we have to deal with both. Yeah,
and I the way I look at it is from an SGA perspective, because hopefully some SGA presidents and people who want to be in student body are watching this as well. You have to make sure, you have to begin to think of both minds as well.
Sure.
Because one of your number one priorities is not just having the best homecoming people remember or the best step show, is right now you have to make sure people are safe. And one of the things that I've learned from examining each of these incidents is much of the activity comes from people who are not students.
Of course not.
And not alums.
Of course not.
Right. And, it kind of goes back to this age old adage that most HBCUs, you hear it all the time, most HBCUs are in some of our forsaken areas in Black communities, right? Save for Hampton. By design. Save for Hampton University. But I do think we have to think about that. And I think that it takes people having some foresight and vision, college presidents, because sometimes they want to think they're on their own, SGA presidents, mayors of your local cities, and law enforcement officers. Somebody who did it right recently, although it wasn't necessarily an HBCU in their city, was Randall Woofin. Randall had the Magic City Classic in Birmingham, went off without a hitch. He has a great police chief. He worked with both college presidents, both schools, campus police, and it went off without a hitch. And so the question is, So I'll pose it to you. Do you make sure that others can't access your campus? Do you fortify your campus? Do you increase law enforcement? I'm of the mind that I think that there has to be some process whereby only those people that are participating in homecoming events or football games can come into those spaces. Those people who want to tailgate, I don't know if it's a ticketing process. And I don't know how I feel about an increased police presence. However, I do think that state law enforcement, in South Carolina, we have our South Carolina State Troopers. Sure. They do the same thing at Clemson and South Carolina State. Sure. Clemson and University of South Carolina on game days need to be monitoring traffic, making sure there's no standstill. And I think that we need the same resources that they distribute to the PWIs at our HBCUs.
So I would say, Bakari, first let me say, HBCUs in most places are the one center of higher education and learning where, whether if you attended or you didn't,
correct,
as a young Black person growing up in that state or in that city or in that community, I know for us in Florida, FAMU was everything. I mean, right?
I used to break into the gym at Voorhees College in Denmark, and so there
you go. These are the fabled institutions where all people could gather, whoever you were, wherever you came from, what your family did, what your mom and daddy did, so on and so forth. So our HBCU homecomings have real special definition, and I think differently than PWIs or any really other institution.
No, sure.
Right. So because of that, it is the center of gravity. It is where people come to gather, from Miami to Jacksonville to Atlanta. If you are in driving distance and fun is about to be had, you're about to see some stuff you ain't seen before, running into some type of people you don't usually run with. It attracts people. But guess what? Most of our cities want to attract people to them.
Correct.
The difference is that we then apply a whole entirely new and different standard to what safety and security looks like once we get those folks coming to our communities. So what I would say is when you're talking about a traffic management plan, run by the city, or you're talking about surveillance around the stadium, or you're talking about your local attractions like the mall and what that would look like. At some point, it became pretty obvious that a decision was made not to treat people coming into our communities for homecomings and for big games like that as normal, fun-loving, family-oriented people who just want to have a good time and have something to do. We started erecting big-ass barricades at the malls, so the first floor and the second floor couldn't see each other. You couldn't throw anything over.
Oh, that's crazy.
Or God forbid, you couldn't look over and make a sound.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
So instead of looking like a welcoming retail establishment, it looks like, some sort of mild capacity detention center.
So what do you tell to I'm in this kind of both worlds, because I have a 20-year-old that goes to Howard University.
Yeah.
And you just had a rash of shootings at Howard that didn't necessarily around Howard.
Yes.
But it's to your first point, it's attributed to. So what do we tell parents that can help ensure them or give them comfort that their child will be safe?
I will just say this: interrogate whether or not it's a real thing that your child is in danger's way by attending the game or being at that university, period.
And 10 times out of 10, the answer is no.
Not,
yes.
Right?
And most of this stuff happens when the sun goes down.
Yeah, for sure. What I would say I learned, both as a SJ president, a student activist, but mostly as the mayor, was the instances that were occurring weren't random incidences of violence. They largely were associated. For instance, we had somebody come up to FAMU's homecoming or come up to a Miami game and shot somebody at the first exit entering the city. They had clearly exited the highway. It was a targeted shooting. I read it in the paper immediately, like, okay, clearly nobody didn't come here and just randomly decides to shoot someone off the exit ramp. No, this was a targeted hit. And so my argument would be, in most of these situations, these are people who have trafficked to a place to probably, again, traffic in illegal activity.
In the bullshit.
Exactly. And what happens if they run up on their score opponent? Where they from? And now nobody got their squad, but you have an opportunity to take somebody
out. The other
out.
thing that's separate, that differentiates, to your point, kind of gives credence to your point, HBCUs, particularly the ones we went to from some of these institutions of PWIs that don't get the same glare or lens, is that we're dry campuses for the most part.
True.
And so you don't have the free flow of alcohol, although people are drinking at their tailgate, but it's nowhere near. I don't know if anybody's ever been to a University of South Carolina or University of Georgia tailgate.
The most unsafe I've ever felt have been at some of those tailgates, except that the law enforcement who's patrolling a lot of those places share a lot in common.
But I do think, let me just say, but I will, this goes back to my other point, and I think we have a little bit of a disagreement here, if not just a little rub. There is a heavy law enforcement presence out there. And I think, to your credit and to your point, if those law enforcement officers are willing to treat HBCU homecoming participants with the same dignity that they treat the participants at these PWIs, then I think that increased law enforcement presence.
That's the only argument I would make.
That's fair enough.
Is if you're designing the road traffic plan, consider that you might be one of the people who attended that game and maybe just trying to get back to your hotel.
Correct.
But when you've rerouted us an hour out of the way just to make sure that the left and the right going traffic never intersect, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. And it also is highly inconvenient and can create, I think, hot tempers. Right?
Yeah.
Because when I leave FSU's game, or whatever the PWI is, it seems like it's built for us to just move traffic and to do so to get these folks out of there as quickly as possible. So what I would suggest for the law enforcement, for those communities, treat them as if you were one of the patrons yourselves. Treat it as if you were going to be there, and what kind of experience would you like? Because that's really what people want. If you're a student activist, know that the people who are coming there, they want to feel safe too.
That's right.
They don't want to get jacked. They don't want to see, gun violence at the end of the day.
And that's not what we know. That
isn't what we know. And it outright undermines and I think devalues the experience of the students and the family who are working, 7 out of 7 days on trying to get their degree. We give some grace there. We both have been there, right? And but generally they're there for a reason. Get your degree, get out, make it better for somebody else. So when we devalue these experiences and when you devalue these institutions by associating violence that occurs while another unrelated event is going on, and making the two one is one, not good journalism, but two, it does a tremendous disservice to these institutions. And then finally, I'll just say on this, Bakari, I think the when you treat people like they are a caged bird, and a bird has only known freedom, they're going to want to feel free. So if you pull a military style lockdown on a place during a festive event, know that you are going counter to what people are expecting when they spend their money.
And these institutions look to these homecoming events as an economic catalyst.
So do the cities, by the way.
Oh, that's true. And so we don't. And I don't think we want to tamp down on anything.
That's right.
But I do want to give a condolence to. I know there was one student at least who lost their lives. That was at South Carolina State. I think other individuals who may have lost their lives were not students, but still deserve the same respect.
Right.
I hope Alcorn and Jackson and State and Howard. And I believe Lincoln University can all bounce back. I hope their presidents are clear-eyed about it.
Yeah.
I hope they think through it, and I hope that they work with their local officials and mayors and chiefs of police to ensure that you can have that fun, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. And
make sure everybody feels safe.
Well, I think they can do it so long as we see each other's humanity. Right. And see what we have in common. I go to a football game. I want to have a good time. I want the law to be upheld, but I'm not arresting everybody who I see drinking in public because everybody would be in jail.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you. This was on my heart for about 20 minutes. So I wanted to make sure we could have this conversation.
We got 20 minutes worth. Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.